you're reading up on MVPs, one of the examples that was given was the self-driven lawnmowers. The first MVP is they had the sensor to identify objects and they put it in a wagon and dragged it around a field manually.
That's a really good example. In this episode, we delve into the art of crafting the right questions to effectively engage potential customers during market research for product development. Discover the strategies that can help you extract meaningful insights, ensuring your product not only meets but exceeds market expectations. This is part 2 of 2.
The Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast is your ultimate launchpad for igniting ideas and skyrocketing your entrepreneurial dreams. Your 2 hosts will be Professor Gary Palin and serial entrepreneur Ryan Budden.
Well, hello, Ryan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing brilliantly as always. What about you, Professor Palin?
Doing very well. I understand you're getting even chillier weather than I'm getting.
Yes, it's very cold here in Nashville. I would say unseasonably cold.
Ryan, today I wanted to do part 2 of a 2-part series of episodes on questions you should be asking your customers when you're doing market research for product development. In the first part, there was a viewpoint of you had just had an idea concept and you were starting to develop the product. That's what those questions were addressing. These questions are after you have your minimum viable product, you have developed something, but it's not fully developed. And what type of questions would you be addressing to your potential customers at that point? How does that sound like for a game plan?
Yeah, I love it. If you're listening to this and you're trying to take out of it and you're in the idea phase, make sure you go and listen to the episode that we aired right before this one. I think you'll get a lot out of that. And then once you have a product or at least a really, really good idea of what that product's going to be, hop over to this episode and you might get a little more.
That sounds like a game plan to me.
Let's do it.
Okay, the first question I would like to ask a potential customer about my product is, would they be willing to actually switch from their current means of addressing this problem to the product that I've developed, and then why or why not, depending on their answer?
Yeah, it's a great one. I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road. After we've talked about this, is it compelling enough for you to consider switching?
And the reasons of why or why not, you have to listen very closely, specifically the why not answers.
Absolutely. And be prepared for the, no, well, we've been using them for a long time now. It's a super common objection that I've found in my career, and having a really good answer is easy in theory. It's really difficult in practice.
If you're getting that answer quite a bit, there's not a compelling reason for them to switch. There's not a substantial improvement in efficiency or some component. It's not going to be incremental, but I believe you said in the episode 1, someone's not switching for $10 a month.
In my experience, nowhere near the burden that you're going to have to place on somebody for it to be a switch process.
Now, we've mentioned the minimum viable product. If someone's not familiar with that concept, I would suggest to go back in our episodes. We did a specific episode on minimum viable product, but just quickly, that's developing the very basic core features and testing the product. It's not the fully developed, but it's much more to that. So I would encourage someone to go listen to that episode if they're not familiar with MVP. And that's a core concept in any type of product development.
It is, and one that you and I are both huge advocates of. I can't tell you how many consulting projects I've gotten on that have overraised or overdeveloped, skipped past that MVP. And now we're going back and finding that a lot of the money they've spent, time they put into development was unnecessary because that's not what the users are actually looking for.
Listening to the customers is key. If you are just developing solely on your assumptions or your intuition, you're making a big mistake. Another question that I like to ask is, can you provide feedback on the prototype? So we asked previously for feedback on the conceptual issues, for what are major features, etc. But now you put a prototype in front of them and you're looking for further feedback to help develop and continually flesh out the MVP to your full-fledged product, or at least version 1 of your product.
A prototype, we could use that word in a really varying way, right? It could be a product, it could be a service, it could be a technology stack. It's just something that you're giving them that's a little more tangible, that they can then give you live feedback or give you a response once they've experienced it.
And it doesn't have to be extremely sophisticated prototype. When you're reading up on MVPs, one of the examples that was given was the self-driven lawnmowers. The first MVP is they had the sensor to identify objects and they put it in a wagon and dragged it around a field manually.
That's a really good example.
Obviously, they're not selling a wagon, they expect people to drag it around the field. But the primary issue is, can the technology identify and avoid a rock?
In technology, we use a lot of screen development. So it gives the look and feel as if it's a live functioning technology product, but all it is a bunch of essentially screens that are clickable. So you can navigate through the app and get some mock data without much development time at all.
We went through that when we developed the Janus Entrepreneurial Assessment. If you recall, the first version was very cursory. We could describe it as ugly and minimal functionality, but we wanted to make sure the algorithm was functioning and we were getting the proper results, not necessarily putting a pretty bow on it.
I don't know that we could describe it as ugly. I think it was ugly.
There's that old theory is if you go back and you look at your first product that you were showing to customers, if you're not embarrassed by it in retrospect, you waited too long to test it.
I think that's from the Lean Startup. I believe that's where that's from.
I'm a big advocate of that. Throw it out there. Even if people are laughing at you and scoffing, that's okay. Get that feedback.
Exactly.
Another question I like to ask is, would you recommend this product to others? And if so, why would you recommend it?
Similar to asking them what their favorite part of it is. You're just phrasing it in a different way. I like that because you could easily also follow that up with, well, do you have some recommendations? Who can I take this to next?
If I'm recommending something to a colleague, a friend, I better damn well believe in it. I don't want to embarrass myself where my colleague and my friend will come back and say, what the heck did you suggest that I use? You don't want to hear that.
We've all purchased things that we aren't necessarily embarrassed about, but would definitely not recommend. It's sort of an extra layer of endorsement.
And it's very telling. And then the reasons why they would recommend it so that you can understand your strengths and then you can implement that into your marketing pitches.
We said this in the first episode, but just to say it again, make sure you're taking notes when these conversations are going on, because it's little things like that that you can draw out and repurpose over and over again.
Yeah, we also said to make sure you record if possible, but get the permission of the person you're speaking to record. The memory is not always clear. Even your handwritten notes, sometimes you look and you don't specifically recall what's said, or sometimes at least, I don't know if you do this, sometimes I can't read my own handwriting. Another question that I like to ask is, can you describe a recent experience you've had with a similar product in our industry?
That's getting at that competitor. What you're seeking there is, what are they doing well? What are they not doing well?
That can flesh out all types of issues and follow-up questions when you're talking about a comparable product. And if you notice, there's a lot of redundancies built into how you're gathering this information, and you're just approaching it from different angles. And it can help you assess the consistency that you're getting from individuals.
You're looking for similar things here, but I find that in these types of conversations, rephrasing the same question is going to get you a whole different answer. They might be more comfortable the second time around, so they're going to give you more information. And oftentimes, I think we have this misconception that everybody has the right answer immediately. But really, if you ask the same question in two different ways, they might have had a little bit of time to think about it more and be giving you a better answer that second time around.
When you address the questions that we went over in episode 1, and you go back to those same customers with the MVP, it's interesting the type of answers that you get. They can visually see the development and the growth of what you're doing.
People react very differently to something that they can hold or see in front of them.
This goes more towards the distribution or what type of channels to use, but I like to ask customers, how do they typically find out about this type of product?
Ooh, that's a really good one. I imagine certain industries, things like trade catalogs are quite big. And other industries, it's just Google, or it might be social media. That's a really interesting one, actually.
There's still the old school types of tried and true methods like trade shows. Do people get their information mainly from trade shows of what the latest, greatest is? Or as you're saying, are they just Googling it and researching it?
I like that a lot, actually. That's going to give you a whole jump on a marketing component can be very tricky to figure out.
And I've also, within the past 6 months, moved more towards, instead of Googling something, I ask AI what the best products are, the alternative products, or what my options are in a particular industry when I'm searching for a product to utilize.
Absolutely. And I am always pleasantly impressed with what it gives you back.
I haven't done any research and haven't looked at any data, but I still think we're still in the minority of people utilizing AI for a broader context.
Oh, there's no doubt we are.
And I'm not saying we know every possible application. We're lucky if we know 1% of it.
Yeah, far from it. I can't tell you how many conversations I have that someone makes it seem like I've never used it before. So there are levels to this.
So my last question, and now I'm going for a trial close, if you will. I ask, would you be willing to participate in a trial or a demo of our product? And again, why or why not?
I said this once before, but that really is where the rubber hits the road. Will you pull the trigger on this? That's a really soft way of asking for the close.
Usually when you're doing this, you're getting very valuable information after they've used it. They may like conceptually what you're doing, what you're talking about, what you're showing them on a very brief version. But when they put their hands on it and try to do it themselves, you'll find out, is it intuitive or not intuitive?
You'll really get that answer, because once someone starts paying for something, they're going to be immensely more critical than before they were paying for it.
Getting someone to do a trial demo of your product is that final step to really fine tuning. And then you can utilize that to close sales and to actually start making profits.
I wouldn't be scared to ask for some amount of money for the demo or trial either. It doesn't have to be free at this point.
Yeah, you can offer a discounted version of it, which is another offer to them. So they're still getting, quote, a deal.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Ryan, before we continue, I'd like to address an important issue for the Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast. Creating a quality podcast with valuable content is very time consuming and has substantial costs to create and produce. To cover these costs, many podcasts use a paid subscription model. Others use a sponsorship model. We prefer not to implement either of these options. I would like to address a concept called value for value podcasting.
While we enjoy creating value for our listeners, providing insights that enhance their entrepreneurial success, it would mean the world to us if our audience would also give some value back to us to support our efforts.
One might wonder, how can you support our show? Well, it's simple. Sharing our podcast with friends, colleagues, or on your social media is a fantastic way to give back.
Also, we love receiving your feedback, comments, or even just a cheerful email.
Or consider making a monetary contribution through platforms such as Venmo or Substack.
You can also support us by setting up a bill payment through your bank. This method allows you to send a contribution directly to our physical address.
Every bit of support counts, whether it's tuning in, sharing our episodes, or contributing financially. Each contribution helps us cover production costs and improve the podcast.
Check out our website at prospirit.com, where you can find more details on how to support us. Every contribution, no matter the size, makes a massive difference. Decide for yourself. What is the value of this episode to you? Let's do this together. We provide value and you return value. Value for value podcasting.
Thank you for being a part of Let's Get Entrepreneurial. Now, let's get back to today's episode. That's my last question. And if you notice, I finished it on a way to make money.
Hopefully that's why we're all doing this.
That sounds good. Well, you have any final thoughts on the concept of questions?
I would just be encouraging anyone listening that this has to be more of a conversation. We've outlined questions to ask, but just make sure you're engaging with those responses. You're not just immediately going to the next question, and making it feel like you're grilling the person.
Yes, in other words, you have to listen.
Yes.
That's always very useful in gathering information. These are not all of the questions. These are just samplings of types of questions. We could keep going and do episode upon episode on different types of questions. We're trying to get into the mindset of the listener, the types of questions to ask, and what information you're trying to garner from the questions was the intent of what we were doing with these 2 episodes.
Get the brain juices flowing, get your mentality in the right place.
That sounds like a game plan. Let's get entrepreneurial.
Let's get entrepreneurial.
We extend our gratitude for your presence and attention. Check out profspirit.com to discover resources and courses designed specifically for innovators like you. Stay on the cutting edge by following us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and other platforms as it is released. Until then, keep the entrepreneurial flame burning.